my name is Karen Ellery Jones, and welcome to my show. Today's guest is Dr. Canfield. He's the superintendent of Sandwich Schools, and I am absolutely thrilled that you've come on today to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. We know that Sandwich Schools have been in the news a lot lately. Some good things, some not so very good things. So let's get right down and talk about your vision of where the Sandwich School District will be in 2020.
Thank you, Karen. It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm so glad you're going to be asking me these questions, because this is really an opportunity for me to clarify for our parents and other members of the community exactly where we are today and where we see ourselves heading. And I want to share some of the background that got us to this point in time when we're talking about 2020 vision and a vision for a STEM academy. I started here in Sandwich back in July, this past July, and inherited some issues to deal with, one of which was to look at how we are currently best using our facilities in an era of declining enrollment. And it's interesting because I presented to the school committee some data from the 2010 census that shows that enrollment is declining on the Cape. There's some natural things that are occurring here. However, we don't have to just take our chances. We can make choices to try and counteract some of that decline in enrollment. Some of that has to do with an aging population, and Sandwich can be a very, very attractive community for young families, especially those that are looking to commute perhaps to Boston or Providence. So we're very hopeful that we can turn some things around. But that decline on the Cape over a 10-year span from the 2010 census shows a decline of 6,060 students.
And that's Cape-wide.
That's Cape-wide, but that's almost the size of two systems the size of Sandwich. So it is dramatic over a 10-year span. Adding to that reality is the fact that there are more choices that parents have now between charter schools, school choice, private schools. So there are more choices. But the way I look at it is that it just presents more opportunities, and because I'm an advocate of all of the families here in Sandwich, I'm glad that they have good choices. There's also the technical schools like Upper Cape Tech. So as parents consider what they feel are the best choices for their children, it's good that there is that competition, because I believe, just as it is meant to be in business, that when you have competition, you respond, and it causes you to strive to be the best that you can be. So upon my arrival, I was aware that there was a group that had been meeting to look at issues around the aging of the Henry T. Wing School. That school, the original portion of the building was built in 1927, and there are many heartstrings attached to that school. I've met so many people that currently have students there where parents, grandparents were somehow connected or attended the Wing School. But the school is aging. It has some needs in terms of maintenance, and so the town began to look at what was needed. And as part of that research and working with a consultant and some engineers, concluded that the needs were significant, and basically came back with some recommendations having to do with major renovations and possibly even a tear down and building something new on that same footprint. However, when people began to look at the cost of those options, and then also looked at the impact of declining enrollment, it begged the question, is this really the right choice for the community, or should we be also looking at some other options? So they went back to the town, and the town agreed to extend the scope of that study to really look at all 4 of our schools, and in terms of their condition, capacity, needs in relationship to declining enrollment. So while the initial focus was on the Wing School, it shifted to looking at Forestdale and Oak Ridge. But it also was looking at the high school. We went back and looked at the records. There was a point in time when Sandwich High School, between students and staff, had just short of 1,500 people in that building. It is an absolutely gorgeous facility and something that the community is and should be very proud of. So when we looked at how we're currently using it, we began to realize that where the enrollment is, that we could begin to think about perhaps bringing 7th and 8th grade to the high school. Folks that have lived here for many years know there was a point in time when 7th and 8th grade were in fact at the high school, and there were certain advantages.
But when they hear that mentioned, you get a whole lot of people who say, oh no, you can't be mixing middle school. I'm sure that you heard, you get lots of phone calls and lots of emails.
Definitely have heard that. So when the thought came about putting 7th and 8th grade in the high school, then that's when I began to think, my goodness, I've been through this before in a previous district, and I learned certain things about that. And I shared that with the committee. What I said to them is there are a couple things that I do know. One is that we need to be able to demonstrate to our parents and to families here in Sandwich that we can organize for instruction and operation of the school in a way that parents feel confident that their children can be safe within that environment. And to me, I look at safety in two ways. It's not only physically safe, but also emotionally safe. And we know that children only learn well when they're in an environment where they, in fact, do feel safe.
Right.
So while there are no absolute guarantees of anything in life, what we can do is do our best to assure all of our parents that we are taking the right steps, making the right decisions, and planning well. In a sense, having the gift of time to really do this correctly. So we began looking at the facility itself and realized that we could, in fact, take a portion of the high school and isolate that, in a sense, because of the way it's designed, to have it be its own space. We began talking about the idea of operating 4 schools in 3 buildings. So if we were to take a portion of the high school and make that into a 7th and 8th grade facility, we know it is an area that could be its own place for kids, have its own entrance, and those who know the high school program know that the high school functions with a block schedule. We would be looking more at either a 7 or an 8-day period for 7th and 8th grade. So the way schedule would be staggered, there'd be relatively little interaction between the 7th and 8th graders and high school students. So we believe that with time and planning and involving the right people, we can plan that portion of it very well and help provide assurances to parents that organizationally we can do that in a way that would be appealing to them. But then the next question in my mind, if I put on my parents' hat, is, so why would I do this? What's in this for my child? What's the benefit? Why would I bother? And that's when we realized that we needed to come up with something that really could be a hallmark for the Sandwich Public Schools and really enhance the view that people might take of the town itself, again, adding to its attraction for younger families to want to come here. And so we began looking at what that hallmark might be. We began looking at what are the assets that we have here in Sandwich, in our surroundings, the environment itself, the very unique and special ecology of the Cape itself.
Right.
We began looking at some of the larger issues that are adult-like issues that need to be dealt with relative to science in terms of water quality and keeping our water supply safe. Other kinds of concerns that are typical here on the Cape. But our location also gives us many options for partnering with other groups, partnering with higher education, but also partnering with the scientific community and others around us. So as we've started talking about it, the really good news and the exciting news from my perspective involves the number of groups that have approached us with a desire to partner with the Sandwich Public Schools in the development of a STEM academy.
Okay, and tell the viewers
what STEM is.
What STEM is.
And that's a great question, because often people say, that sounds great, but what is it and what does it really look like? So STEM is really part of a national movement. In fact, I believe it's now gone global. And it stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And there are a few different models out there, and I've spent a lot of time researching them, and I'm very familiar with what the various options happen to be. So when we're talking about STEM Academy, the focus is clear by its title. But I've had people ask me, well, what about literature? What about language arts and social studies? Well, they are definitely part of the curriculum in any STEM academy, in part because it's required by law.
Right.
And obviously, literacy, that is the ability to read and read well, remains as the gateway for all learning.
Right.
So we need to be sure that we're doing a great job with literacy within the district. Social studies, understanding the history, and there's a rich history here on the Cape. Even when we look back at the history here with the Glass Museum and the Boston and Sandwich Glass Company. And when you really start delving into it, glass is not just about the artistry of blowing glass or pressing glass, it's understanding the chemistry of all of it. So there are many dimensions, and it's important for students to have that historical context as they look at various STEM topics. The other thing that we that came up in terms of question, it has to do with the role and relationship of the arts. And there are some models out there where people have promoted the idea of add A to STEM to make it STEAM. And my response has been, I can't quite envision a sign saying STEAM Academy.
Right, yes.
But I can absolutely assure people that the research is clear. The arts belong in any STEM model because we have a much better understanding today of the importance of the relationship between right and left brain development. And that begins for many children with exposure to the visual and performing arts. It is that creative element. When I look at very young children, and I believe parents can identify with this because they see it with their own children very early on, I describe it as a sense of wonder. That sense of wonderment, like always wondering, how does this work? How does that work? And there were some older school models, probably 30, 40 years ago, where unfortunately that sense of wonder was often squashed when kids got to school because you sat at a desk and you listened well and you had to behave well. And not that behaving well isn't important in schools today, but what we're discovering is kids need to be personally engaged and connected with their learning. And when they are personally engaged and connected with learning, you tend to not have, behavioral issues. Kids want to learn. They're experiencing it, and it can be a great experience, but it involves much more hands-on.
So a STEM classroom
learning.
Would be more hands-on. More
hands-on, what we refer to as inquiry-based learning. So it's not so much teacher-directed as it is working together in teams for problem solving. So we take that natural sense of wonder and we do, get into creativity, which they may experience initially with art, but you're always looking to make connections. And people that I talk with who are engineers, architects, they will tell you that they need creativity in engineering and in mathematics and in science and in technology. There needs to be that creative element. So now, through various groups that I've been involved with over the span of probably the last 8 to 10 years, looking at these issues and the impact on our economy in New England and certainly here now in the Commonwealth, the importance of building and sustaining a workforce that can not only think creatively, but where the end game for students exiting 12th grade is to be more capable of innovative thought, because it is innovation that drives the economy, and we need to be doing a better job at that. So we would look to do that through a STEM approach that takes that natural sense of wonderment from the early ages for children, and it basically extends that throughout their entire journey to the point in time where they exit 12th grade and then go on to whatever their choices might be for higher education, technical schools, or to enter directly into the workforce. Right.
So initially it's going to be 7th through 8th, but you will take the STEM program and integrate it throughout the K through 12.
Absolutely. There is what we've now defined it as, basically a trickle-down effect into the K-6.
And a triple.
And a splash-up, we're calling it. Splash-up effect at the high school level.
Yes, because you can't trickle up, you have to splash.
But the way in which this works, When you set that focus on 7th and 8th grade, because we know that that's a significant transition period for students as they're becoming more independent as learners, which is why you want to have your focus there as they're getting ready to enter into the high school, where they have more course options and electives. But what needs to happen in the K-6 is you have to have a plan for how you transition and move toward that STEM experience in 7th and 8th grade. And there are some really excellent models out there that we need to spend more time looking at and researching. I have one that I in particular like that was started by Dr. Michael Clenchey out in Southern California, because it has been well tested. It actually was a precursor to STEM. He had, basically it was the southernmost district in California with the largest non-English speaking population. But he recognized that their low performance on test scores had nothing to do with intelligence. It was a language issue. So what he decided to do was to capitalize on his belief that all children have this sense of wonderment. And if you can engage them through an inquiry-based approach and hands-on approach, that you can then build other subjects around that. So what he did is he developed a curriculum that had science as its core. And then he wrapped around that core reading, writing, mathematics, everything, so that the kids began to see the interrelationship of how reading and writing, especially reading, non-fiction reading, which is often a weak area for students across this country, more technical kind of reading, but it still can be very engaging when kids see the connection, and they could see that through science. And he brought his scores up dramatically. That was one of the, as I say, precursors to STEM. And what he did is he worked with people locally to actually develop STEM science kits, working with plastic bins like you might buy at an office supply store, and then filling them with materials that were designed for those hands-on experiences. Today there are several science companies that actually produce those kits for use in schools. So there is a need to begin that investment and to build that as you go up along the line.
Right, so first you have to select the particular curriculum that you feel best fits Sandwich students.
Right.
And of course the budget as well.
Right. Right. And you know, the thing is, lots of times there is the assumption that there's great cost to this. There are some investments that need to be made, but a lot of this has to do with helping people understand what is different about the way in which you teach and learn within a STEM environment. As I've said to people, wanting it to happen and just putting a sign on the building does not make it STEM. You will know it's STEM as soon as you step inside the doorway. It should be a very magical learning environment for kids, where kids are really engaged, where kids are working as teams on problem-solving kinds of activities. There are some, even at the high school models. There's a high school in Pennsylvania that was built through funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that has a very different tact in that it's all about creating a work-like environment where high school students are working as teams with significant problem-solving kinds of experiences. But one great example that I've used in illustrating this for parents and for staff, and it's a very true one. We had a unit in 5th grade science that happened to be meteorology. And so at the end of the teaching of that unit, students were given a test, and a large part of that test had to do with being able to accurately define meteorological terminology. So a student who studied well, perhaps memorized well, who could define those terms correctly, might in fact have gotten an A or gotten 100 on the test, and the conclusion would have been, great, you now understand and know meteorology. When the truth of the matter is, they may not have a clue about how meteorology actually works and how we predict weather and why that's important. You know, when
They've
we
just
look at,
memorized.
Oh, sure. And when you look at, you know, the Challenger incident with the O-rings and temperature and all, there are so many issues. Or historically, if you look at what occurred on D-Day and how decisions about the weather and predictions were so important to the success of D-Day toward the end of World War II, one can understand why understanding meteorology is very important. Well, today for students in a STEM model, that meteorology unit would involve the kids actually looking at real-time weather maps. Instrumentation, which is now available to schools, is not real expensive. There are grants out there that can help school systems with those weather stations. But students are actually working with that, and they have a culminating task. The task happens to be that you are a weather forecaster working for the local TV station, and your responsibility is to prepare the 6 o'clock weather forecast. So working with the instrumentation, that's what they do. And then they have to present that. At the end of the presentation, they're then asked or challenged to defend their prediction. So you're raising that to, in terms of the kind of thinking skills that are required, it really raises the bar for students to have to defend their own prediction.
Right.
And I've seen them work in teams, and it brings in a creative side. Some students will decide that they just want to write it out as the script to be used for the forecast. We've actually had students that have worked with a camera to actually record and pretend that they were actually on the weather channel, you know, giving their report. And now with smartboard technology, you really have the ability to pull some of these weather maps actually onto a smartboard and present as if you truly were on TV. So you're bringing communications along with the science. And
right, so there goes the language arts into
absolutely
the STEM. What modifications would you have to do to this school to bring it into a STEP academy?
Well, at this point in time, we are working with a consultant. As a matter of fact, I'm meeting with a consultant tomorrow who's going to spend a couple of hours with me. But we've already walked the buildings and particularly walked the high school. So a lot of it has to do with looking at projections on the class sizes and the number of students we have coming up through 7th and 8th grade to really determine at what point in time could we do this and have them in that location. As I've shared this with parents who've heard the vision in the community, and I've not been able to communicate with all of them, that's why I think this is a great opportunity for me to be here today. A lot of excitement. I've had parents say, you know, gee, I was really committed to the K-8 schools, but having heard the vision, I find that exciting for my child. You see, another reason for looking at 7th and 8th grade in one location is that you can then consolidate your resources. So when we ask the question of how do you work this within the budget and how do you afford it, well, if you're trying to provide this level of resource across 3 separate school locations, you just can't do it in a cost-effective manner. And when you bring all the students in one location, the possibilities are tremendous for one-to-one computing. We're talking about robotics, and there's some great sources out there of groups that are willing to support us and help through grant funding to develop a robotics program for 7th and 8th grade. There are also kits, by the way, that can be used down into the elementary school and even more sophisticated robotics for high school. There are high schools that compete in the state and across the nation programming robotics. So that can be done, but you would not want to spread that cost out to 3 different locations. You'd concentrate it in one, makes it much more cost effective, much more feasible. It would be my prediction based on experience that while parents want to know that you've got their students in that space, I would predict that within a year or 2 you're actually going to have some parents that will say, gee, my child is thriving so well. Is there any reason why they can't actually step outside the boundary of the STEM Academy to take a high school elective in an area that they seem to be focusing on?
And so you would say?
And I would say, yes,
absolutely.
you know, when we're ready to do that. Some parents may not want that, that's fine, they don't have to. But it would be my prediction that they would want to be able to step out and have that experience.
And that's similar to high school students who can go to Cape Cod Community College in
Right.
effect to take.
That's right. We've also, and the other part to this has to do not just with the academic side of it, but I would love to see Sandwich regain its music program. We have such talented young people here. I've had the opportunity to see the talent at the high school and within our K-8 programs. But the ability to give them a culminating experience at the high school with a very strong performing arts program. Right now, it's challenging for us to accomplish that within the budget. But if we had 7 through 12 there, you're really talking about your K-6 programs actually feeding into now what is really a unified 7 through 12 program. And again, whether it has to do with band or jazz or whatever the future should hold, maybe even a strings program, who knows. But when you have that many students concentrated in one location and bring the high school back, instead of being around a student population of under 1,000, to bring it back closer to its capacity, you're also able to offer more in terms of programming in that kind of a situation.
What do you say to the folks who say, you know what, the school budgets eat up a lot of the town budgets. Is this going to cost more money?
Well, again, it comes back to that idea that we have choices to make, and there are ways in which we can do this over time, but also to have people understand that we do receive funding through various grants. There is a lot of grant funding that is available to districts at both the state and the federal level to support the development of STEM. This is a national initiative. It's come right out of the White House because of the recognition that our ability to retain our edge internationally, both in terms of our ability for national defense, and I'd like to think it's not just about our capacity, our ability to fight wars, but to fight the war on cancer, heart disease. Our young people that are in our classrooms today, they may in fact be the ones that we turn to in the future to fix our heart, cure our cancer, or to deal with the very complex economic issues that we are all facing today. So I can tell you, as someone who's been around for a while too, as Mike here would attest, I understand when people are concerned about taxes, especially people who are on fixed incomes and retirees. And to me, that's what community is all about. We need to be caring and sensitive to the needs of everyone in the community. And so when I work with our students, our high school students, I go out of my way to ask them, do your best to connect with others in the community, those who may not have children in the system, because we're all in this together. I need you to care about them and their needs. At the same time, because we're turning that to them, our seniors, to ask them to help and support us. And I want to be very clear, I have many senior citizens in this community that I interact with who are very supportive of our schools. They care about the kids. Some of them may really actually even see it as a patriotic need to do that. Some of them that go back generationally to the Second World War and recognize that our success in that war was based on our ability to really convert our industry in this nation and basically turn it on a dime to produce the kind of armaments that were required to win that war. So many of them do understand that as they look at this generation and look at what's happening in the world today, they know that we need to keep our nation safe. We need to develop young people who can go out there and then, after their K-12 experience, go on to higher education and opportunities to become our scientists, our engineers, our tech people, so that we are on that leading edge. So I believe that we can make it happen. There have been some points, as I said to people, I'm not one who, I don't tend to get discouraged because I believe in what we're doing. If I start to even weaken in that direction, I just step out of my office, walk around the school and interact with students. Because when you see them and you talk with them, you realize it really is worth doing. That's what bolsters me. Do I sometimes feel disappointed? Yes. because we've come with a vision. I believe that this is a great community. It's a great community. However, it comes back to just making choices or taking our chances. And I believe its position on the Cape can be very attractive to bringing families in. So when I see an article, for instance, that speaks to the number of houses that are on the market here, I look at houses too, and I'm realizing that many of them are 3- and 4-bedroom Capes. And those are homes that you're more likely to be able to sell them to families.
To families, that's right.
But families are only going to come if they believe that there are quality schooling options here in Sandwich. And there's no reason why. We do perform well. And I would want people to understand I am, by nature as well as by title, the strongest advocate for the schools in Sandwich. And certainly because I am the strongest advocate for our youth, for our young people. I believe that schooling is not just for kids in K-12. We want to be able to run programs and offerings at the high school for adults as well. We've been doing that through the community school. We may look to do that through other offerings that occur, through an evening kind of program. But we've got great facilities that should be used. Our community school, by the way, has had some 300 different instructors from Sandwich. And so many of them look to our schools as places where they can offer mini programs, and it helps them financially. And for some of them that generally rely more heavily on summer vacationers for the main part of their income, but they do need to find some other ways to earn some additional funds. Many of them have turned to our schools to be able to use our facilities to offer different programs and activities on a fee basis. And to me, it just adds to the richness of what Sandwich has to offer to all people. So.
Now, if folks want to get some more information on this STEM program, where can they find it?
Well, I will tell you that we are working toward putting more and more on our website.
Okay.
We just opened, I'm very pleased to say, that we now have our new website for the Sandwich Public Schools is up and running. It's been redesigned through a lot of volunteer efforts by some of our teachers. And I'm very proud of them and the work that they have done. And the website looks great, and it looks very professional. I think it speaks well of the district. It's also been designed in a way that makes it easier for us to keep it up to date. I think we all know how irritating it is to be looking for something, go on a website and find it's out of date.
Last updated a year ago.
Right. So we're doing that. And so we will continue to add more and more information in a reasonable fashion, not to overwhelm people, because then people tend to back away and say it's more than I can possibly take in. But if people can find links that describe what STEM is and other kinds of information, that will be really helpful. In this next phase, we are basically redoing each of the school sites, so they'll all be linked together with a common framework for navigating. So it will the navigation will be the same between the schools and also the district website. So there'll be more information coming there.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. This was very interesting, and I hope that people who view this program will be a little less apprehensive about the STEM and the vision for moving Sandwich schools forward.
Yes, I hope so.
Thank you. Thank you.